Hey there, it's Christian with another board game review, and we've got to talk about this. This is Degenerates. Now, why do I want to talk about this? Because, well, it's currently got a rating of 8.3 on Board Game Geek. That's very good. Secondly, it's an open world RPG adventure game. There's a very sort of fantasy, grim setting. Those are all things that make me want to talk about a game, if that's the premise of it. And thirdly, it does, of course, I'll show you the cover again, look like it has been vomited up by a troll who's eaten several tins of paint. So we're going to have a talk about the components, all that eye bleed inducing art. We're going to talk about the gameplay, the good, the bad, and then finally, in conclusion, I'll discuss whether this could be the game for you, as it is also soloable, or whether it's the game for you and your gaming group. So let's get into the components. No doubt about it, components looking like some of the footage you're looking at now is going to be opponents for some people. I mean, I have no idea if this game is brilliant or terrible if you're colourblind, but the art is unrelentingly 80s acid punk glory. It is spectacular throughout, and I chuffing love it. Now, I know art is subjective, but Sean Aberg, or Arberg, I'm not entirely sure how to say his name. I mean, he's been putting out art like this for many, many years, and it's always this high quality type acid punk stuff. Now, I would say it has this retro quality feel to it, rather obviously. It reminds me very much of Games Workshop, late 80s, early 90s, a lot of stuff that was coming out then. And it oozes life. And I would say it is unique. I can't think of another game that looks like some of the stuff that you're looking at now. I mean, it's all just, it's so bright and it's so vivid. Now, what's really important about it is not only is it unique, which is a rare thing to find amongst board games, crumbs is how many are being made now, but secondly, it really adds to the atmosphere, massively adds to the atmosphere. This is a pretty grungy game in many ways throughout, and so this art really adds immensely to the world building, the atmosphere that's being created here. And talking of quality, it's really good. The cardstock's thick. There's lots of components. The printing is very rich colours, obviously. The standees are fine. You can get models, miniatures. They're pretty difficult to get hold of. They're sort of kind of Kickstarter type things and pretty limited edition. But the standees are great, not an issue, and work really well. The rule book's good, with an index, and the board itself. I mean, the board is an extraordinary piece of art. I mean, I could frame it and stick at it. In fact, there's quite a few bits of art I would happily frame and stick around the place. And I mean, just have a look at some of the detail here as I do a couple of kind of close-ups on the board there. Just a heads up though, there is also some content from one of the character expansion packs in this footage, but whatever you manage to get your hands on with this game, which is one of the difficulties with it at the moment, it is hard to get your hands on. Whatever you get your hands on, there's lots in that core box, loads of stuff, loads of cards and counters and your standees, and there's dice and all sorts. So it all looks amazing out on the table. It's really eye-stabbing. I mean, eye-catching. There is loads of monsters to fight. I mean, there are 4 big piles of monsters and 4 big piles of encounters relating to the different areas on the board that you can go to. There's bosses and stacks of loot items. There's so much stuff. It is a beautifully produced game. The only real drawbacks to the character cards is that they're a bit thin. The art is lovely on them, but it would have been nice to have sort of proper thick card rather than a really quite thin card. But I mean, that would have bumped up the price pretty considerably. Some of the tokens that you use to track stuff on your board, they're small, okay? And so, you know, if you've got fat fingers, it's pretty fiddly. But I guess these are quite small things that I'm finding a problem with. Some people have mentioned, and I certainly did find it to some extent when I was playing, is the sort of form versus function thing of the board. Occasionally it's a little difficult to know exactly where are we on this board? What type of path is this that we're on? However, I think in terms of the small sacrifice that occasionally is, just in the first game or two whilst you're getting used to it, that is a very small thing in terms of all the benefits that you get from this incredibly rich, full of detailed board that is endlessly fun to look at. One thing as well with this amount of components, you might find that it's quite a long setup time and tear down time, especially if you're trying to look after it all and keep it all nice. I would say it's probably a good 15 to 20 minutes to get everything set up and everything in place ready to play, and you're going to spend another 10 minutes packing it away as well, of course. So that is something to bear in mind. This really is a game that benefits, as it has campaign play. It really does benefit from being able to be set up and just left out. So, gameplay, because that's what these open world RPGs is all about, right? Let me tell you a story. Early on in my adventuring career in this game, I decided to go and explore a big graveyard, which is down in the sort of bottom left of the board there. Now, whilst I was there, I happened across a mass grave. That was the event that I drew off the event deck. And I encountered a witch and her impish familiar sort of guarding, looking after this mass grave. With the courage of the ignorant, I charged into battle to try and kill the witch. I didn't manage to in the first round. At the end of the first round, she summoned another creature. Now, normally what would happen is that first round summon effect is a one-time effect. But because I'm fighting next to a mass grave, she's able to keep going with those summons. Any monster that has the summon ability with the mass grave can keep going. She just so happened to summon another summoning creature. In the second round, I did not manage to kill that witch again. Her imp familiar thing was defending her and effectively taunting my attacks, and so stopping me from finishing her off. So not only did she summon, but then the creature that she'd summoned also summoned. I was starting to get swamped, and absolutely, in the end, I was completely overrun, and I met a grisly fate in the graveyard that night, and thus came to the end my very first adventure. Now, of course, I later, and checking the rules, found out, I could have actually just fleed combat, but I didn't know that at the time, and so I came to this glorious end in that haunted place. However, this is one of the things that I would really want to press home to you. This game really, really creates narrative and creates fascinating story. It is, if you have any sort of imagination, it is very, very easy to imagine yourself in all of this rich diversity of places that it has across this great big world to explore. And there is so much variety in the things that you end up getting involved in and doing, that it really is a true joy of this whole system. And there are many things I could say about the mechanics of this game, from the combat with its sort of fast and simple but fun and engaging way of doing combat that keeps things ticking along nicely, to the way that you kind of engage with the board, the amount of engagement that you have with the board and the world and what's going on, which I shall focus on a little bit more, to the leveling up, which is simple and cool. You know, you have this kind of upgradable skill system. There's a lot that you can say about so many of the mechanics, but I want to focus on two in particular, and that is the the world building and how that comes to life in this game, and the missions specifically, since that's what you're going to spend most of your time thinking about and doing. Guys, I am struggling to remember an open world RPG that I've played that has succeeded in building such an amazing world. I mean, this is a world that is rich. It lives and breathes the horrible, dank air that surrounds the First Reich, which of course is sausage realm, translated, if we're going to do that from German. And there's some of that kind of sense of tongue-in-cheek humour throughout all of this, a kind of a black humour in many places, but this world with its sort of foulness, and it really is a grungy, horrible, disgusting place, and everybody in it's grungy and horrible and disgusting and covered in warts and all that sort of thing. And because of that, it has this wonderful evoking of it's a throwback to a golden age of RPGing, I think. And that's really, in many ways, what seems to have made this a fairly extraordinary hit. Certainly amongst the people that I've played it with, and looking at some of the reviews, across the sort of gaming community at large, really. It is wonderfully immersive. And this is enhanced brilliantly by the missions, the really well-designed missions, which are very varied. The system is fantastically flexible in this game. I was constantly impressed at how they'd used a very simple set of mechanics and then brought in lots and lots of depth and variety in how they created the missions that you then undertook. And there's 20 missions in the core set. Plus, there's a whole bunch of small expansions that are coming out fairly soon, which have a few, 2 or 3 missions in each, I think. And then there's a bigger expansion, Main Street. So, I mean, there is a lot. Now, I have played probably 40 hours worth of play of this game, and I have done half of the missions in the core set. So there's a lot of play here. And it's these missions that allow you to you end up really caring about what's going on because of how much these missions affect the board, affect the world that you're living in that true aspect that we really crave from these open world RPG games. Now, I don't want to spoil any missions, but you'll genuinely greatly affect this world. You'll be reducing crime and corruption in certain areas, as of course you're going around killing, marauding monsters or bands of vagabonds or whatever. Or you might rescue towns from the clutches of some brigands, or you might ally with a particular faction and start setting up trade routes and things like this. And that's it. There's politics in this world and background, and there's so much richness that you end up tapping into with these type of missions. And the missions themselves have a great deal of variety, from kind of find and deliver type missions to combat-based missions, to go and kill off a boss mission, to clear out a whole area type mission, or to build up some towns type mission. There's just a huge variety of things that you can do as part of the objectives of the missions. And it strikes me that all of this is just way more epic and grand and extraordinary than I really thought a game like this could actually be. To squirrel yourself away in the corner of a map, trying to sort out one area and doing whatever it is that you're doing, it still leaves you feeling like there's all this massive world out there to explore, and there's so many adventures that you're enjoying the one you're having. This is great, this is fantastic, but at the same time you're excited to explore around the rest of this enormous world. What would happen if I went there, and who would I meet in that place, and what monsters would I be able to take on there, and all that kind of stuff. So you end up getting always left with the desire to explore that swamp or that set of caves or whatever it may be. And that's partly why it keeps you coming back to this game. And the different areas of the map are very distinctive as well. They've each got their own sort of horrible denizens that live there. And your missions will get you focusing on travelling and exploring across the different areas. So you go to all the different towns and villages and cities and settlements and so on, setting up camps and rescuing homesteads, townsteads, finding legendary items, or clearing away the said horrible monsters, so that you sort of increase your standing with the people of the land in that kind of faction, working with factions type fashion. Okay, so what was bad? Very little overall, I have to say. Each mission can be a bit epic. How's that bad? Well, some of them are individually, really quite long. So, and could end up taking you more than one gaming session. So, some of the missions in the book you could literally do in, 40, 45 minutes. And then some missions in the book are enormous, cool quests, but they're going to take you 3-4 hours maybe. And it's going to, unless you're sitting down for long gaming sessions, it's going to split across gaming sessions. And you might not like that sort of lack of bite size about the game. And in addition as well, it's a long game that you really have to campaign to get the best out of. Now, you don't have to play through all 20 missions. It doesn't work like that. It has a sort of branching type system. And that's where a lot of the replayability will come in as well. Even some of those missions that you will have played through, the next time you play through them will be really quite different. Even the same mission can have kind of different parameters that again make it feel like a really quite different mission. So it's kind of 20 plus missions really. Another thing that you might find frustrating if you do is keywords, because there are a lot of keywords in this game. Now, that's not bad for me. I love keywords. I love the granularity that they provide, the ability to make all these different creatures and monsters be so varied. But there's a lot, and you will need to reference a lot. Thankfully they do a good job all over the place with various bits of reference material, shall we say? I suppose there's even really nice glossy handouts, as it were, within. So they do a great job knowing, that's going to be a possible problem. Let's head that off with a pass, and they deal with that in the components. Very good. So this really is, I would say, a bit of a masterclass on how to bring an open world RPG to life with really rich background. It's got fascinating encounters all over the place. And then, of course, it's got all this gloriously disgusting world. Now, another thing that I would say, one of the big things for me in gaming generally is I love to play games with music playing. And I tend to focus on having music playing, or at least ambient sort of soundscapes that fit with whatever game it is that we're playing. If it's a cyberpunk game, well, there'll be some kind of, dark wave, retro wave sort of thing going on in the background. This, well, it's so gritty and horrible. If you're into things like your dungeon synth or death metal and all that kind of stuff, get some bolt thrower on the stereo. This is, in all that kind of retro glory, it's marvellously evocative and goes really, really well to kind of just support it with that kind of oral experience. So if that's something that you enjoy in your gaming, and if you don't, let me encourage you to do it. It really does add to the experience. This game is so good for just fitting in with that general feel. So who is it for then? Solo gamers, tick, yes. This is a great fun game to solo. You could just play with one character, but you probably enjoy it more, I would say, with two. You could take more than that, but two is probably plenty enough. It works really nicely solo. There's lots of great narrative, lots of cool story, and you can completely immerse yourself, get the headphones on, and off you go. In terms of playing with more players, 2 players, brilliant. I had a marvellous time working through a campaign with a buddy doing this. and working together and planning where you're going to go and what you're going to do works really well. However, I would say that once you start getting perhaps, 3 players is probably still going to be okay, but once you start getting to 4, I'm not so sure. You might have almost too much sort of organised between yourselves, and you're going to start detracting from enjoying the real narrative. Dependent on your group. If you've got 4 people who love RPGs and want to take things at a slow pace and just enjoy the world building and the immersion and everything, you'll probably still really enjoy yourself. But just bear in mind that if you're going to do a game like this, standard for the genre really, if you're going to go with the 4 players, and it is 1 to 4 players, then it might just have a little bit of downtime. Although you can split off, not generally recommended in these games, but actually it can really work in this one, and have almost 2 parties going off and doing their thing. But again, you'll then have that, or whilst they're doing their thing, we'll sort of sit and watch and see what happens. If you love that, you're going to have great fun. If you want to be playing all the time, then you probably need to keep it to just the 2 of you, or hit some solo. So, Dungeon Degenerates. If you enjoyed the review, please do hit like and subscribe for more of this type of content. Dungeon Degenerates really is a unique gem in my collection, and I think it will be so for many years to come.